And welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us here on a January day in 2010. Still trying to get used to that new calendar year.
Indeed. And we've got a young man going to join us who's been a prosecutor in the Eastern District of Oklahoma for many years, more years than he is old. I don't know how he does that, but he's a young-looking man who's going to tell us about the criminal prosecution in the Eastern District of Oklahoma, Sheldon Sperling.
Sheldon Sperling, today's guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
A greener planet, cleaner air, a healthy economy, national security, a smaller deficit and a stronger dollar, green jobs, better jobs, energy independence, warmth and light and transportation. These are the reasons Chesapeake champions natural gas every day.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to have join us from Muskogee, Sheldon Sperling, who's the United States Attorney from the Eastern District of Oklahoma. Sheldon did his undergraduate work at Northeastern State College in Tahlequah, did his law work at the University of Tulsa. He has been in private practice. He has also been a state court prosecutor for a number of years, and since 1985 has been a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District. Since 2000, he has been the United States Attorney in Muskogee. He's the only federal prosecutor in the system to have tried 3 federal capital cases to convictions by a jury verdict. And this is his first appearance on The Verdict, and we're sure glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Great. How's Muskogee doing?
Muskogee is it's doing very well, actually. I'm doing well. As I have a wonderful crew there, and we have a really good office. I think we have recruited well.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the size of your district. We have a map that I'd like to go to at this time, but it kind of shows that the state of Oklahoma is divided up into 3 thirds, and that Shelley, from a U.S. Attorney's standpoint, is involved with one of those thirds. Take a look at the map here, if you would. And so you're the orange section on the southeast part of the state.
We are the orange. We are the east-southeast. It's the Eastern District of Oklahoma. Used to be 2 districts in Oklahoma.
How do they divide these up?
Well, historians tell, I think, the story that we were originally slated to come into the Union as 2 states, Sequoia, the eastern half, and Oklahoma Territory, the western half, but apparently the prospect of 4 opposition senators was more than then President Teddy Roosevelt could handle, and so we came into the Union as 1 state, but 2 federal districts that retained
Now,
Muskogee.
Am I right to assume that the Western District has more people than the other 2, or is it not by population?
There are more people in the Western District, but it is roughly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We have a little over 1 million souls in our district, in the Eastern District, and there's a little over 1 million in the Northern and about 1.5 million in the West.
Now, I can't see the map too close to there, but is part of the Oklahoma City Metro in your district, or is it really excluded?
That's all excluded. Oklahoma County and Cleveland County are in the Western District of Oklahoma.
And Tulsa County is in the Northern District?
That's correct.
Okay.
And our district begins just west at 193rd East Avenue is where our district begins.
Okay, we
in
have
Wagner
a
County.
couple of other pictures that we'll go ahead and gravitate toward, and you can kind of give us a little bit of the history of what these pictures are that we're looking at.
That's a ghillie suit. A number of years ago, we had the honor and obligation of trying 2 capital cases back to back. This was the trial of Edward Leon Fields, Jr. He donned a ghillie suit and shot and killed 2 innocent campers in the middle of a federal campground in LaFleur County.
And the purpose of the suit was what?
Disguise. A ghillie suit is often used in military functions and military circumstances for snipers, to keep the sniper from being seen. And this defendant actually was a former prison guard. He was a hunter and fisherman, and he often used this when he hunted and fished with a friend. But he donned this suit late at night. He stalked a husband and wife, 47 and 50-year-old husband and wife from Dallas-Fort Worth, whose passion in life was to find out-of-the-way places to camp, and they certainly found one at a very stately federal campground, a winding stair in far eastern Oklahoma. At about dark.
And what year was this murder and trial?
The murder occurred in 2003, and the trial occurred in 2005.
Okay, and we
With
have
convictions.
With conviction and a capital verdict as well.
and we have another picture that I think has kind of an interesting story to it.
Now that is from the original capital case that we did in the Eastern District of Oklahoma. It was a murder that occurred on July 4, 1991. The trial was the first 3 months of 1993, and this was a murder. Actually, the drawing is something that the defendant penned during the trial. It always pays attention to watch, I suppose, defendants and what they do during trial. And this was a drawing that he penned during that trial that actualized what had happened in that case.
Was he professing innocence?
No. He was professing that he wasn't the lead man. He actually was not the shooter. It was a complicated story,
Okay.
but in essence, there were 11 people that were brought from north and south of the Mexican border, some from Southern California originally to shoot and kill a car lot owner that had been suspected of stealing 100 kilos of cocaine. He was part of that scheme.
I see.
Now, Shelley, your office does both civil and criminal matters. Is there any rough percentage of how much of your office's time is devoted to criminal matters as opposed to civil?
I think the apportionment of the assistants themselves tells a lot of the story. Our civil section actually is not all that well publicized, but does great work. In our district, we have 3 civil attorneys. We are allotted 4. They do a lot of federal tort claims acts. We have many Native American hospitals, and invariably, if there's a malpractice action that is to be brought, we defend the lawsuit. And we have some very good lawyers in our civil division that defend the United States when the United States gets sued, and that advance various causes on behalf of the United States. We also have 9 AUSAs in the criminal division. And of course, that gets more of the publicity because criminal cases have, I suppose, a bit more pizzazz, as usually you have victims and you usually have crimes of some notoriety or interest. But we have 13 AUSAs altogether.
And your office was involved, and you may or may not be able to talk about it, just respond as you feel appropriate. The McMahon State Auditor Inspector case with Steve Phelps and Senator Stipe involvement. Your office handled that prosecution, did it not?
We did. Actually, the original case that was brought as the result of straw donations and that conspiracy that occurred in the 1990s was brought by our office in the earlier part of this decade. We ultimately opted to move that case to Washington, D.C. and to try it there. And I think it was a manner of vindicating not only the interest and fairness of the trial, but also to avoid any hometowning with regard to that case. And so that case was ultimately transferred, as you know. Senator Stipe then ultimately pled guilty to the 3 charges, the straw donations. He used straw donors, people to donate more money than he was legally allowed to donate to a congressional campaign, that of Walt Roberts in the 1998 campaign. And ultimately, he pled guilty to those 3 counts and was sentenced in Washington, D.C.
One gets to be a United States attorney by appointment of the president. Is that in general correct?
The saying sometimes goes that there's a difference between a federal district judge and the United States attorney, and that's that the federal district judge knew the U.S. senator who was senior better. But actually, I think in my case, I may have outlasted many in our office. I was an AUSA for 4 years and a first assistant and criminal chief for 11 years before I bumped my head and took this career ender in about 2000.
And you were appointed by?
I was originally appointed by Janet Reno. Actually, I took office a few days before the 2000 election. My predecessor, Bruce Green, resigned and retired, and Janet Reno appointed me as an interim United States attorney, and I served a succession of appointments by Attorney General John Ashcroft before I was presidentially appointed on December 5 of 2001.
Now, your district has some or all of the 5 civilized tribe headquarters within it?
We do. The Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Creek Nations are all headquartered in our nation, in our district.
How does
all of
that
those
impact
nations.
your work?
Substantially, although I must acknowledge that as Indian nations go, the 5 that are in eastern Oklahoma are well advanced in terms of law enforcement, and particularly with regard to on-the-street law enforcement. The tribal police in each of those nations, or at least in 4 of those nations, and then the 5th that is served, Seminoles, by the BIA, are well served by highly competent and well-trained officers.
Mm-hmm. Do you have typically lots of issues with the tribes themselves?
We have quite a few issues with regard to gaming. Often, if embezzlements are occurring, those are brought in our office. We also have what we call checkerboard jurisdiction. And since we don't have reservations as such, by and large, there are trust properties, but by and large, mostly what we have in the Eastern District of Oklahoma is checkerboard or parcel by parcel jurisdiction. It's a remnant of property as it was held many, many years ago, in which property could not be bought or sold or alienated by Native Americans absent the authority of the Department of Interior.
Sheldon Sperling is our guest. He's a United States attorney representing the Eastern District in the state of Oklahoma. We'll be right back with more on the verdict.
I am Shay Buchanan, Special Olympics Athlete of the Year, and I am Chickasaw. I have scoliosis and problem with my joints and my arms.
It just amazes me every day to see her here whenever the doctor said, you know, that there's a good chance that she may not be with you for very long.
The competition, it's real good. I throw my softballs far, and I get a ribbon. In the next Special Olympics, I will run faster, throw the softball farther, and I will win.
And I thank God every day that I am blessed with her because she's my little angel.
I'd like to thank the Chickasaws and my friends and family for being there and loving me just the way I am.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Sheldon Sperling is our guest. He's the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of the state of Oklahoma. I guess you've had some interesting cases in your days on the representing the United States and representing the state of Oklahoma. Give us a couple of anecdotes, if you would.
Well, I think the capital cases were the most challenging. I think anyone who does murder cases or capital cases on a day-in, day-out basis has to be just a special kind of person.
Now, just tell our viewers real quickly what you mean by capital case.
Capital case means a case in which the defendant may be punishable by either life imprisonment or death.
Okay.
And these are cases in which a capital sentence is on the table. The first one, as I think we mentioned before, was in 1993. It involved the theft of 100 kilos of cocaine from a large drug organization that operated partially out of Southern California, but also out of the rural Muskogee area at the time. The guy who was making trips, he would fly from Tulsa to Ontario, California, get out, go to the Countryside Inn, wait for a knock on the door, wait for the keys to be handed him, wait until he was sure that there was no heat on the truck, then get in the truck, drive it back with 100 kilos of cocaine to the Muskogee area. They'd park it for a period of time to ensure that there weren't any law enforcement officers observing, and then they would distribute it points elsewhere: Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, and Dallas, also in North Carolina. The owner of this enterprise in Oklahoma, the leader of the enterprise, decided that he was going to get out of the business. He had made enough money, and so he told his driver, who saw the golden goose about ready to die, and so as a result he stole the golden egg. He stole 100 kilos of cocaine. And needless to say, the enterprisers from Southern California and Oklahoma weren't too happy about the loss of $3 million worth of dope, and so they went after the people that they suspected. They ended up killing an innocent man in rural Cherokee County as a result, and the defendant, the lead defendant, McCullough, was convicted, as well as 3 others in that scheme. The other 2, one involved the murder of Rocky Eels, a highway patrolman serving a high-risk arrest and search warrant on September 24th, 1999. And the defendant, who was convicted in federal court and sentenced to death in that case, is now the subject of 2255 post-conviction relief challenges to the conviction. And then the third one, obviously, was the Gilly suit case, and that was the one. I learned actually to say the word neuropsychopharmacology with some practice in that case, but it was a complicated case. As you might expect, often defendants don't walk in and say, "I will help you strap me to the gurney." And I'm not meaning to be flippant about this, but there typically is an excuse and a reason. And this case was actually tried not long after the Gilly, or the Beltway snipers had kept the East Coast at bay, not long after Chechen rebels had killed some 360 people, to include little kids. And I know national policy isn't made in Muskogee, but at the same time, I think one of the ways we impact what happens on a national scale is how we handle cases that are brought to us. And in that case, the defendant had asserted that he was hypoxic when he was born and suffered frontal lobe damage and was judgmentally impaired as a result of oxygen deprivation. He asserted that he had been misdiagnosed, that he was really bipolar, rather than merely depressed, and they gave him the wrong antidepressant, Effexor, which triggered hypermania, and on top of that, he was suffering, as he said, from command hallucinations. And we worked hard. I think my old headhunting days came into play to recruit the experts in those cases who did just wonderful work in dispelling the claims advanced.
These are
by the
jury
defense.
trials?
They were.
And so I would assume that it can be fairly difficult to try and explain to a jury of this person's peers exactly what they're dealing with, because it sounds fairly complicated to hear you tell it now.
It's also emotionally very gut-wrenching, because it's very difficult. Jurors are now put on the spot to make a life and death determination. And in these cases, the jury verdict must be unanimous. If there's one holdout, the sentence shall be life in prison rather than the death penalty. So it's important to get things right, and it's important to thoroughly investigate and present the cases.
Insofar as prosecutorial discretion is concerned, when you get a case like this in your office, is it your judgment alone about whether to seek the death penalty or not, or do you have to go higher to get approval to do it?
That's one difference between federal and state practice. State district attorneys can make the capital decision themselves. Federal U.S. attorneys must go through a protocol. We have to seek permission, and ultimately the Attorney General of the United States determines whether or not we are allowed to seek the death penalty.
So you've sought that 3 times, and it's been granted 3 times.
We have, and it has been, yes.
Does your office deal with terrorism at all? as we know it here, just as general citizens?
Well, fortunately, we haven't been the subject of overt terror acts. You know, it's getting closer and closer. We had the shooting at the recruiting station in Little Rock, Arkansas. We had the horror at Fort Hood a number of weeks ago. But we have not had overt acts of terror. We're doing things, though. I mean, each office has an obligation to set up an anti-terrorism task force, and ours is manned by a wonderful Assistant U.S. Attorney, Chris Wilson. As he says, we are filling our toolbox. We are preparing. Though, as with any crisis, and we certainly saw that with the advent of the Oklahoma City bombing, you can never prepare enough. But we're filling our toolbox. We are preparing for the advent of a catastrophic event. At the same time, we've been really fortunate. How we affect national policy often is in decisions that we make. And just as with regard to the ghillie-suited case, in the wake of the Beltway snipers, in the wake of the Chechen rebel murders, of a school being held hostage by armed rebels in horrific ways, and I won't take the time now to detail the horror that was visited on children and women during the course of that captivity, but it's awful. And how we affect that in our district is to make small decisions, as in the case of Fields, who shot and killed 2 innocent campers. It was my determination. It was our collective determination, ultimately the determination by the Department of Justice, that he should not be allowed to plead guilty and take a prison sentence, that was just over the line.
So if a terrorism event should occur, your office is ready to deal with it as best you can.
I think as best we can. I won't be so boastful as to say that we are ready for everything. Now, I'm amazed that we haven't been hit. And we don't often like to talk about our good fortune, and it's undoubtedly a result of preparations that have been made of the Department of Homeland Security and the way we have restructured various entities and agencies. But at the same time, we've been fortunate. We were hit in 1993. The World Trade Center was hit in 1993. We were hit again 8 years later in 9/11. It's 8 years past that. We're due.
We mentioned at the beginning of the show that the state of Oklahoma is divided up into 3 districts. How do you cooperate with the other 2 districts? Do you all work together on projects?
Often and very well. I must say that, with regard to Robert McCampbell, who is a good friend and the sentencing guru for the U.S. Attorney community during his time, during John Richter's tenure, John Richter knew where the doors were in the Department of Justice, having served in Maine Justice. And of course, Bob Traster, who is a wonderful careerist and a thoroughly honorable man. We've had really good fortune to be able to work with 3 good men during my tenure as U.S. Attorney. More important than that, both in the Northern District, though, and in the Western District, so far as our district is concerned, AUSAs know each other. And, I'd like to say that U.S. attorneys are really important, but, we're as good as our staff. And I'm so proud of the crew that we have in the Eastern District of Oklahoma. I think it's a credit to how we have recruited, but at the same time, AUSAs from our district know AUSAs, assistants in the Northern and Western districts, and they work together very closely.
Sheldon Sperling, thank you for your service to the United States and the state of Oklahoma.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it very much.
Kent and I will have a final word right after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. a place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Sheldon Sperling, U.S. Attorney representing the Eastern District of the state of Oklahoma, roughly the southeast quadrant of the state geographically.
Yes, well known among the practicing bar here as being a place where you get fair treatment, you get even-handed treatment, you get treated with respect and civility, and I think that starts from the top, from Shelley's office on down to his assistant U.S. attorneys that he referred to as AUSAs. They run a first-class operation over there, and we appreciate him coming to visit with us.
Must be some interesting situations also dealing with the 5 civilized tribes as sovereign nations.
Well, you've got to be very active and very nimble to occupy that position, because the challenges with which you're faced are many and varied, and the few within that rank of prosecutor, few at that level, have the fine reputation that Shelley has.
And the appointment comes from Washington, from the U.S. Attorney General or the President himself or herself.
Yes, and the supervision is intense.
I bet. Well, we want to send you to our website. If you have an idea for a show you'd like to see on an upcoming edition of The Verdict, go to that site. It's theverdict.tv, theverdict.tv. Hope you enjoyed today's show. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you back here next week on another edition of The Verdict. See you then.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.